Welcome to Catalyst, a program about people, ideas, issues, and conversations around them.
Welcome to Catalyst. I'm your host, Jess Wilson. I'm joined today in the studio by artist David Sokol. Welcome, David.
Thank you.
So thanks for joining us. Can you start by telling us a little bit about yourself? You're a visual artist, musician?
Well, I'm not a musician. I'm an artist, and one of my favorite things is to explore new media. I love the learning curve. So for about 15 years, I've been primarily a printmaker. This project is completely new. I'm not really a musician. My colleagues that I worked with on this were musicians, but my attempt was to move into theater and music as a visual artist and a writer.
Well, and you're here today to talk a little bit about your most recent project, which is called Shylock Sings the Blues, and we're going to delve into that. But before we get there, it's always fun to learn from someone where the spark of this idea came from, and this is definitely an idea that had a spark.
Yeah, spark's a good word, because later we're going to show this video called There Is a Fire, and the fire represents the spark that's in everybody that I see as creativity. It could be desire, could be money, could be greed, but that spark for me is art. And I was sitting in a Broadway theater a couple of years ago seeing a performance of The Merchant of Venice, the one with Al Pacino. And when Lancelot Gobbo, who is Shylock's servant, took the stage to do his monologue, it was like I heard it for the first time, and this light bulb went on in my head, and it's almost like something grabbed me by the back of the neck because I heard it in a whole new way. And basically what I heard was this character in the play portraying a bigot, and Shakespeare's writing showing us very briefly the anatomy of the mind of a bigot. How otherwise maybe decent person or thought themselves decent could do horrible things through bigotry, and how they could convince themselves that it was okay. And that was so powerful for me in this play, which has a lot of bigotry in it, anti-Semitism to be specific, to see that Shakespeare had another message here. And then as I researched it, I found that message reflected in more than just the Lancelot Gobbo speech, in numerous ways. And I wanted to do something with it. And what I've done, I write in journals about bigotry and anti-Semitism, very small audience, scholars, if 25 scholars maybe read the journal if they have an article in it, Mm-hmm. So I wanted a bigger audience, and because I thought this was interesting. So I thought I'd do it in the most entertaining way I could, and I came up with this Shylock Sings the Blues, derivative of the original Merchant of Venice play, to emphasize the interpretation that I see in the play.
And Shylock is music, it's visual art, it's theater, so it's combining a lot of different elements.
Yeah, there's an animation video that's part of it, actors, musicians. So it's multimedia, really.
Great. Well, we'll talk a little bit more about that, but I think it would be great for our audience to provide a little more context and talk a little bit about the inspiration for this piece, which is William Shakespeare's The Merchant of Venice. And this play, certainly very well known, criticized for being anti-Semitic, but you've seen something deeper in it, and you're not the only one. Certainly, there's a lot of folks out there who've talked about this as well. But can you talk about what in the play? Actually, even before we go that far, how about a synopsis for folks not familiar with the show? And this is challenging. Let's boil down a Shakespeare.
It's a very long play, and it often
complicated.
gets cut. And often that reference I made earlier to the Lancelot Gobbo speech is often cut by directors because they don't think it drives the story along. Mm-hmm. And they miss this message that to me says Shakespeare knew about the mind of a bigot, and he was trying to tell us so. The play is about, there's a lot of pieces in the play, so I'm just going to refer to the storyline that's applicable to this. And that is a 16th century moneylender, not a 16th century merchant who has his ships out all over the world in the New World collecting goods. He's invested in that. He's basically a venture capitalist who's invested in these ships to bring back the money that he can make from it. Shylock is a Venetian Jew who, in those days, the Venetians lived in what was called the ghetto, behind a gate. They wouldn't let them out at night because they were afraid they'd do business that didn't serve the Doge, the Venetian leaders. So it's a story of Shylock, who's an oppressed Jew in 16th century, and this merchant who is a wicked anti-Semite. I mean, he spits on the Jews, he curses them. They're all the other characters are, to one extent or another, very anti-Semitic, very bigoted, not just against Jews, but against people of color. And there's a lot of references that these people are very bigoted. And Shylock has an opportunity, quotes, to lend money to Antonio, because Antonio's friend, in my play, he's a homosexual partner, keeping it quiet, because my play takes place in mid-century New Jersey, and it was not, and the Venetians are the mafia, so it's not cool to have a gay partner, but they are. And Bassanio, the younger partner of Antonio, the merchant, wants money so he can go and court Portia, who is a wealthy daughter of the Don.
So he sees that as a way to pay off all his debts if he can
and marry her and get
right.
rich. And I'm sort of shifting over to Shylock. They're parallel stories. One's in New Jersey mafia, the other's Venetian courtiers and merchants. So it's a story of revenge for this terrible treatment that Shylock has gotten. Antonio goes to him because he needs money temporarily, because all his money's out in these ships. Well, to move on quickly, the ships all crash. He doesn't have any money to pay Shylock back. Shylock loans him the money interest-free, but with the consequence of not paying that Shylock will take a pound of flesh from Antonio if he doesn't pay on time. So that's the core of it. There's romance between Bassanio and Portia, the Don Street. There's comedy, but that's the thrust of the story as it moves on. This tension about what's going to happen if Shylock is Shylock going to take this pound of flesh? Is Antonio not going to come up with the money? That's the part of the story that I focus on.
And then it culminates in a big trial.
Then there's the trial, right? The trial scene, because he doesn't come up with the money, and that's kind of the climax of the play, where everything is exposed about, are they, the mafia, or the Venetian power elite, going to allow this Jew, second-class citizen, to take his fair due in this deal? And my play explores motivation, what's really going on with Shylock in this. In the original Merchant of Venice, Shylock is portrayed pretty much as a greedy, stereotypical Jew, although there are humanizing factors in it. In mine, he's more complex character. He wants revenge, but he's also a good man. He's also a man who follows his religion, but he wants revenge, and he's in this dilemma. How do I react to oppression? Do I become like the oppressor and lose my values? And I don't want to give necessarily the end away, because there's a little tension there. But it's about choosing freedom to respond and the cost of responding. There's a line that says there's a comfort in silence and there's a cost for speaking out.
I have to ask you, how was Pacino's Shylock?
Pacino was very good. Actually, the woman who played Portia, Lily Rabe, was fantastic. And the director, Tom Sullivan, who was the director. I've seen the play numerous times, and that was the best one I've seen. I like Al Pacino. and he was great. You know, Italian Jew. It's the same thing in New York. So he did it very well.
So let's look a little bit deeper. You know, as you went on this journey, you were sparked by seeing Merchant on Broadway, and you started to look deeper into the text. What were some of the sort of aha moments or speeches or phrases besides that Gobo speech that really made you say, hey, there's more going on here than just Shakespeare writing a really anti-Semitic play and playing to them that played well in its time?
Well, as you said, there have been other people who've taken questionable interpretation about, is this an anti-Semitic play, a bigoted play, or is this a play about bigotry and about anti-Semitism? I think my particular interpretation, and the beauty of Shakespeare is everyone can have their own interpretation. There's no absolutism to it. Mine is a little unique in that I'll tell you what these texts are, or what the references in the texts are to justify my take, which is that Shylock never really intended to take a pound of flesh, because he was a human being, a good person. And we see that to some extent in the hath not a Jew eyes? If you tickle us, do we not laugh? If you prick us, do we not bleed? Which is a humanizing speech that Shylock gives in the play.
And I don't want to interrupt you, but I forgot to share at the outset of the show that we will be sharing some images. And what the audience is seeing right now is your rendering of Shylock.
Yeah. He's Shylock. And also, hopefully, we'll see the animation that is sort of a synopsis of the images in this story. So there's several things. There's hath not a Jew eyes, do we not bleed when you prick us? And one interpretation of that is it almost makes the anti-Semitism worse, because it makes him a real person, not a clown or a cartoon. It makes him real. So they're saying, well, really Jews are like this. I don't take that interpretation. I think it's one of several kind of messages that says that the Christians are wrong in this play. Another one, which is I think a very powerful one, is the famous speech from Portia, the mercy speech, which she uses in the trial to condemn Jews and to condemn Shylock for not being taught mercy through the Christian teachings. And that's a theme of the whole play, the Old Testament versus the New Testament, or the Bible versus Jesus, and the insufficiency of any other religion other than Christianity, because they don't teach mercy. But the kicker is that mercy speech was lifted almost verbatim by Shakespeare from a Jewish text by a character named Ben Sura that was written in 200 BC. So this condemnation of Jews that's in Portia's mouth is in fact taken from a Jewish text, which shows that her charge that Jews are without mercy is completely erroneous, and Shakespeare knew it. And we knew he was familiar with that text because he named both his daughters from names that were in that text, and he also lifted other parts from that text in this place. So to me, that's a very strong point, that anti-Jew plays were selling well. Christopher Marlowe had a big hit in The Jew of Malta. And so Shakespeare thought, well, I'm going to sell some tickets, about Jews. But I think given these two and other points, which I hope we get to, show that he knew very well that bigotry was wrong, both morally and truthfully. That this bigotry served a purpose of greed, and that these issues that he brings up and puts in Shylock's mouth are actually a mirror to this society at the time, and that what the Christians are blaming on Shylock is actually reflecting what the Christians do.
And how did he get away with this? I mean, were people onto if what you theorize and others do, is true? How did he get away with that, do you think? Because I'm guessing this play played to the masses as they stoked their anti-Semitism.
Yeah, well, at the time, how far to go, limited time to go. Well, the Jews were supposedly kicked out of England in 1290. In fact, most of them were kicked out before that, but in the 16th century Elizabethan times, there were Jews. And some of them were people in high positions. For instance, Dr. Rodriguez Lopez, the doctor to Queen Elizabeth, was a Jew. The Bassano musical family, the court musicians, is very strongly believed were Jews. There's even a theory that's not less substantial than these other points, that the Dark Lady in the sonnets was a Jewish woman. So there were Jews in the higher levels that the educated people knew. So they knew Jews didn't have horns. The uneducated people had all these myths about the evil Jew. They had horns, they ate babies, all this stuff. So Shakespeare's, in my opinion, had a real sense of selling tickets. And the way he could sell tickets to plays was to address as many people as he could. So in my theory, he addressed the rugged might not be the word, anti-Semitism to the rabble, to the masses who bought the cheap tickets down below. But he threw this kind of hidden anti-bigotry message in to appeal to the more educated people who knew that there wasn't maybe this evil inside, and knew that it was mostly used for political purposes.
Do you think that's okay?
Okay?
Okay,
I'm
trying to formulate a good question. I guess, the idea of playing to the lowest common denominator, it's like he's having his cake and eating it too, and I guess, he's
well,
playing,
I don't know.
I mean, it's like putting out a piece of work that could, very negatively affect people.
Well, we have to look at. I don't have.
But his time was
that's
different.
Interesting.
Yeah,
exactly.
I don't know if I'm not articulating my point
this
very
guy
well.
Harold Bloom, who's a bardologist, one of the leading scholars of Shakespeare, thinks The Merchant of Venice did more damage to the Jewish people than any other cultural event in 400 years.
Wow. Okay.
And
That's
so
a strong opinion.
he would agree. He wished it was never written. My goal with this is to have people think a little differently when they hear Shakespeare's words. When they, hopefully, when people hear that mercy speech, they'll go, wait a minute, he knew this wasn't true. When the daughter, which I didn't even mention, his daughter who leaves him at the end and leaves her religion and leaves him, at the daughter when she says, sweet music no longer makes me merry. In other words, she's really sad at the end. I think that's an implication that you made the wrong choice, girl. You left your dad, you left your religion for these other people who are attractive, but you're never going to be happy again. And that there's several other points too that hopefully people will notice, and it'll change in terms of making a moral judgment on Shakespeare. I don't know that anybody's qualified. I haven't thought about it. He was surviving, and I don't know if it's time to get into the times. Can I go on?
Oh, absolutely.
The pound of flesh really freaks people out. Oh my God, that's such a horrible thing to demand. What kind of cruel person would demand a pound of flesh? Well, if you look at the times in late 16th century London, Tuesday night was bear baiting, where they would stake a bear on a rope in the ground, bring in vicious dogs, charge money so people could watch the dogs tear the bear apart. That was every week. Then on Saturdays, there was hangings, drawing and quartering, beheading. And they would lift the head up and show it to the audience, not to show the audience, but the head could still see 8 seconds after it was taken from the body. So they'd show the head, everybody laughing and jeering at them. If you were to cross the London Bridge, there'd be maybe 30 heads rotting on poles on the bridge. This was everyday life. So a pound of flesh in that context is a little different than in our sweet, civilized world. And this leads to my theory that he's showing, certainly the Jews of the time weren't doing that. They had no power. They were just, but he's reflecting, this is what the English were doing. This is what you're doing to people, and then you judge me. So I'm not sure how I got to that part, but I think that's another indication of or another way to get the audience to look differently at Shylock and a different message.
Great. Well, and did you want to say a little bit more about that Gobo speech before we move on?
Well, it's the comedic break. He's the Falstaff of Merchant of Venice, and often the fools are the ones who come out with the pithiest truths. So he comes out and he has a dialogue between his conscience and the devil. And his conscience says, you know, Shylock is your master and you should stay with him. You shouldn't leave him. That's wrong in our society. But I can make more money going with Bassanio and leaving the Jew. And then he builds this whole case about how evil the Jew is. And he basically comes to this thing. He goes, yeah, I know it's wrong to leave. My conscience says don't leave. The devil tells me to leave. But the Jew is even worse than the devil. So whatever's wrong for me is okay because the Jew is even worse. So he justifies his own evil by comparing it to this myth that his victim is even worse. And to me, that was like Bing. That's how normal people take houses, take land, take jobs, take economic benefits by rationalizing. I know it's wrong, but these Indians, Jews, whoever, are worse, and so I'm justified. And he does that. I mean, this is lame compared to how Shakespeare describes it in 3 minutes, you know. But in the Shylock Sings the Blues production, I have a song called "The Devil Told Me," and it's the song where Lancelot has an inner dialogue and comes out with his decision to be a bigot.
Well, Shakespeare certainly understood the psychology of people, I think.
Right. Yeah.
Nailed that. Well, I want to make sure we have enough time to talk a little bit more about your production now that we've given a little background into your thinking and the development of it. And what I'd love to do right now is actually take a look at the animated video that was created as a part of that performance. So let's take a look at that.
So this is my art,
Yes.
and the editor is a guy named Matt Lovin in Hawaii, a very talented editor. So we had a great time doing this. You know, I'm sitting there playing with imagery, and he had not only the artistic vision but the technical skills to
pull it
do
off.
it.
It's phenomenal. Let's take a look at that and we'll chat a little
Thanks.
more.
Good.
There's a fire that wants to set me free. There's a fire and it's deep inside of me. It's in the daughter and the son. Oh, that flame burns everyone. There's a fire, there's a fire, there's a fire. Oh, your fire, it may grow blazing bright. And your fire, it may glow in the night. In the dark where monsters lay, only fire will chase them away. Burn the fire, burn the fire, burn the fire. Oh, burn that fire, burn the fire. Burn that fire, burn the fire. Burn that fire, burn the fire. Oh, you'll get no higher. Burn the fire, burn the fire, burn the fire. Oh, you could choose and you could lose, but if you don't
So there was a piece from Shylock Sings the Blues. Now, let's talk a little bit about you. You did a performance during the Jazz Fest. This involves music, video, live theater. Can you talk a little bit about
Yeah.
that?
Well, I first want to announce who these great artists
yes.
are.
Who was that
the
singer?
The singer is Nicole Nelson.
Beautiful
who has
voice.
moved to Vermont and just this year has been chosen the 2012 Female Vocalist of the Year in Boston. She was on The Voice last fall for 3 weeks.
Yeah.
She sang last 2 weekends ago at the Red Sox game, 36,000 people. She's just fantastic. And Dwight Richter is on here too, and he's a great arranger. So Dennis Wilmot and I wrote the songs. I wrote the words, Dennis Wilmot wrote the music. Dwight helped arrange it, and it was performed by Nicole, Dwight, Dennis, Jeff Salisbury, and Tom Buckley.
Great, and I want to just show folks, so there's a CD.
Yeah, you can get it on CD Baby or Amazon.
So you have a CD, and then you did the live performance. And is this a project that's continuing to evolve?
Yeah, the live performance had Kim Assam, who was fantastic, and singing as Portia, and she was great. And yeah, I don't know, I'm not sure what the next step will be. I guess in the theater world we say this is in development, and it was great. The audience loved it. You know, it's standing room only. Everybody's cheering and happy at the end. As a writer, I saw more work to do on it before it's producible. So I'd love to find somebody to help me produce it again. You know, more. But Dennis McSorley played all the male roles, and some of Portia is a local.
Great local
actor.
actor.
Great actor, and he did a great job. And one of the greatest things for me for this project is the collaboration that I've gotten to have with other artists, which is usually different than being in your studio doing printmaking. So the community of artists is really a great benefit for this project for me.
And if folks wanted to learn more about the project, your website would be the place to do that?
Yeah, david-sokol.com.
Great. Well, we could talk for a lot longer
right.
about all these subjects. So rich, so much here. But we are out of time today. So I just want to say thank you very much for coming in and sharing your art with us and your thoughts about Merchant of Venice. It's been great chatting with you.
Thank you for having me. I love talking about this subject, and I appreciate the time.
Great. Well, we want to thank you for watching this edition of Catalyst. I'm Jess Wilson, and we'll see you soon here at RETN. Thanks very much for watching.